All right. Well, welcome to the show. This is the Weekly Jargon. I am Jose Rodriguez.
Rohi Zachariah.
And today we're absent Abel Perez. He's out at the Tulare Ag Show. I think he's out there getting some business out there in his field of expertise. So we wish him well. Go out there and get the business, Abel. We'll go ahead and see you here next week. So, Rohi, how's your week been?
Oh, not bad. It seems like always trying to keep up with what Trump's doing next.
That's right.
It's always the conversation around the shop is, did you see what he did? Do you know what he did?
I just kind of tune off here and there, but it seems like it's the constant same thing. It's fabulous. It's big. And you're fired, right?
Well, that and funding. I mean, I don't know if it's smoke and mirrors yet, but he's going after the spending. He's trying to get that spending under control and cutting where some of this may be going unnecessarily.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the task that Elon Musk has, right, and his team.
Yeah.
So what's becoming somewhat of a controversy is that a lot of these funding cuts that they're doing could be deemed unconstitutional from someone that doesn't really have an elected position. I mean, maybe hired through the Trump administration, but there's been some controversy on that. Not sure how that will kind of shape here in the next couple of months, but certainly it seems like they're still rolling. They're still moving along, right? They're still getting some of these offers being made to certain public employees. And I think there's a GOP, a senator out there that was presenting some graphs and charts about what's happening out there as far as like the spending and the cuts that are taking place to see how you're going to save this much money, which is one day truly a spending, but it's not sufficient to be able to get us to where we want to be. So I think these cuts are just more like you said. Although they may be efficient, it's just not going to take us to that finish line without really taking bigger cuts on entitlements that are before us.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I also wanted to congratulate you because as of last week, I know you are now officially a member of the city council.
Yeah.
So congratulations to you. I know you had a lot of family to show up out there in your ceremony, but congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Anything you want to add to that?
No, just we'll keep on moving. The first meeting was already a difficult one, so I think after that it'll be a nice, easy sailing. Hopefully,
once you settle in, of course. Well, good. I think you were the preferred, and there you go now. You're going to be in the hot seat making decisions. So good for you. So part of our discussion today is to talk about, we talk about this a lot, and it's mainly housing, right? Affordable housing, for that matter, today. We look at our cities and we look at our nation, and we start seeing, is the affordability, does it meet in today's standard of living with wages and what have you? And maybe I'll ask you then, start off with that, Rohi. Not necessarily what's happening here in the city, but what you see in general. I mean, obviously, the biggest impact we see is what we see here locally, but what you hear, what do you think? I mean, are we heading?
I mean, housing's tough because, again, what we see, and we've covered a little bit, throughout the time, is you're seeing where, I don't know if you want to say that it's unaffordable. I mean, obviously with current interest rates and housing prices, I mean, some of those numbers are getting kind of scary when you look at a house payment nowadays compared to maybe 5-6 years ago. But I think it's also somewhat sometimes priority. We've changed this idea of ownership, and again, we've talked a little bit about that before. I don't have, like, you don't find a generation of 20, 30-year-olds saying I want to buy a house. Maybe a small percentage, but that's kind of lost. And I think because especially now with payments, it becomes definitely unobtainable. And the only way, like we have with shrinkflation in our food, the only way to do that is shrinking the house and the property and getting into this where at some point, like we're getting with some of these ADU stuff, a shed, because if you buy this shed on a 1,000 square foot piece of land, then maybe your payments are going to be something affordable like $500-600 a month, where you would be paying like rent to in an apartment or something.
And is that kind of where you see we're heading to? And the reason why I ask is because if you go down, especially in our city here, you would see homes that were built a little above average, right? And you see a lot of these here when you start coming out to the west side, like these custom homes that were made. By the way, most of them were built by Barry, and a shout out to him and his family or his business for really developing even this office that we're in here. But you know, that was the development idea at the time is, hey, bigger is better, right?
Yeah.
So when you see these homes that go up for sale now, a lot of them are dated. And now when someone is buying this home, you're not just buying a small home. You may be buying something within 2,000 to 2,700 square feet home. Now, if it's just you and your spouse, then the idea sounds good to have big, you know, everything's big.
Yeah.
But the maintenance on that, you know, you can only imagine the energy or electricity now, then it's probably not common for today. But I mean, when we talk about affordability, you're starting to see that a lot of these homes may not come for sale because the way they look at it is, well, I live in this home, my kids are coming back because they can't afford what's out there.
Yeah.
So a lot of times these big homes become family homes, right? And typically that's what it is. But the American dream that was painted for us was that you individually, alongside your partner, spouse, would go out and tackle this dream. That's the American dream that was painted for us for many, many decades. Yeah. And I mean, I was drawn to that idea, right? I wanted to buy my first home, not knowing how, but I went out and I purchased it. And I feel like this was an accomplishment. Are you seeing that now, though? I mean, are we seeing at that level, especially with the low inventory now, is that dream still there?
You know, I don't think it is. I don't think, you know, I believe there is probably that number or that age gap has shifted where, like, we would say maybe 30 years ago, you know, in your 20s, you know, you're getting married, you're starting your family, and that was the kickoff to buying your home. Well, people are getting married later for one. They're starting to have their kids later for one. So I think that number has pushed maybe to their later 30s now. But then you also have a cutoff because if I'm, let's say I've been renting, you know, for most of my life and I'm in my 40s or 50s, buying a home now seems not really logical because, again, why am I going to lock into a 30-year loan knowing I'm going to be dead before it even pays off, you know? So I think there's that attractive window or age gap has shrunk to a point to where it just doesn't make sense for most people. Like, you don't have that, like you said, long-term goal of saying, I'm 21, I just got married, I have my wife, I'm going to, you know, buy my house, and by the time I'm 55, my house is paid for, I'm retired, and I'm living in it. Like, that dream is gone.
Yeah. And I see that, I think I explained this to you before, is that the amount of first-time buyers, and the word first-time buyers means, hey, typically that means that I'm coming in with the least amount of money, and I'm assuming that there may be some down payment assistance so that I'm not really making that big investment and trying to capture my first home. Yeah. Well, if homes are generally about $400,000 to $500,000 on average, then you're looking at $14,000 just in the down payment. Typically, that's just the entry fee for like a government loan, right, or FHA, or even a conventional. But then you have your closing costs on top of that, and that's going to be an additional $10,000, $11,000. So your initial investment has to be somewhere between $25,000 to $30,000 to be able to get yourself in a home, assuming that there isn't any other assistance or anything. So not everybody has $28,000 just hanging in there, right? Yeah. Especially folks on the lower income brackets. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's still quite a bit of people that are making the purchases just like traditionally they have in the past with that aspirations of becoming a homeowner. That we're not taking that away. I'm just saying it's not as common to see more and more of these people flooding the market with that because, one, the low inventory, and two, the cost of housing has really gone up. And I see it firsthand. I mean, obviously, you have to have really good income to be able to say, you know what, you're good to go. But if you're scratching the surface just to make ends meet, then that becomes a problem because you're just one job away. Yeah. Something happens within the and you're maxed out, and that's what I see is a lot of the debt to income ratios with one person or maybe two people reaching their max, and because that's the only thing that's available there. It's not like you can find a $150,000 home out there. And maybe the concept of these ADU/tiny homes may be the future to be able to just make a $1,500 payment. That's the norm.
No, I mean, I think it's, I would disagree. I think that what you have is an unwillingness for people to kind of realize where we're going. And it's that E in Doge, it's the efficiency. And it's efficiency of resources. Because when you talk about affordable housing, like true affordable housing, it's always goes kind of in one direction, which is apartments, right? We're gonna cram density, multi-level, because we're gonna put 100 families in the space that normally maybe only 2 houses would go, and it can be done because they don't need a toilet for each person. Like you see that these shared use apartments kind of coming back, almost like dormitory style, where you have your own room, but there's one common bathroom. It's efficiency of resources. Now, instead of having each person have a bathroom because they want their own bathroom or shower or whatever, we can share resources and again get that density level, because that's where affordability is going to come. If I have a piece of property that's quarter acre, I want to get the most people and the most stuff on it, and you can't do that now, not with a single home. And when I say people are in denial, it's because again, where you see homes going, they're getting closer and smaller and denser. And at some point, why don't you just become a condo? Why don't you merge those 2 walls? And guess what? You take that 6-foot easement on each side, and you can get more space. You can now have maybe a little bit bigger backyard, but there's this unwillingness to let go of my, I guess, identity or my independence per se, of saying like, this is my home, these are my walls, this is my fence, and leave me alone. And it's getting to the point where you can't do that anymore.
And I'll take this back to like the explosion of suburbia, right? Which was probably in the 1950s. We started seeing like the subdivision tract homes coming around, and then you started seeing everybody, the white picket fence, the beautiful home, me. But now we're like reversing back to what probably was before that, is these high-rise buildings that had people living in them and shared space, right? For example, like you said, a lot of these condos are, you see them in a lot of these associations where they have their gated communities, right? They have shared community rooms, they have a shared park, and the concept of that seems fairly like it's very feasible and very efficient. But for us, I think we drank the Kool-Aid of saying bigger is better.
Yeah.
And it is to some degree, because it gives us that freedom of saying, I own this land. Truthfully, I mean, if you stop making payments, not really, right? You'll find out that you don't own the land, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a whole different topic, right? But going to that concept of saying, I own this land, I own this property, look at this vast space. I mean, then if we're going back to this idea, then did we really have a lot of waste resources when we were trying to build and expand these huge communities now? Because now that we're looking at them, a lot of these communities that were built in this fashion are dilapidated, have infrastructure problems. We don't collect enough property taxes sometimes to be able to maintain every single infrastructure that was put in place at the time, because at that moment, that was the ideal, is to try to build big, and essentially with, I don't know, maybe ongoing taxes that would pay for itself, but that didn't happen.
Then that's where you want to say that there's a problem, and I'll say it like this. So for instance, where the association I'm in, it's 118 homes. They're paying currently $85 a month. That $85 is enough to maintain their roads, which are much nicer than Madera roads at this point, maintain a park, and have enough in the bank should we have any kind of infrastructure issue, and still make them improvements. But why I say there's a problem is because if I take anybody outside of that lot, like across the street where it's not an HOA, and you were to tell that person, we're going to increase whatever it is, a new tax, whatever you want to call it, of $85, but promise you all of this: maintain a park, your roads are going to be buttery smooth. It just can't happen. And that's where you kind of say, like, again, with this Doge idea, this efficiency idea, like HOAs, what they do perfect is this mini government, right? There's not a lot of government waste. We're not spending unnecessarily. We have this ability to kind of, through a smaller governing board, make sure that we're not doing anything crazy with our spending. But across the street, we can't do that. And that's where it's sad, because imagine on a city level, we just said we're going to raise everybody's rates this $85. I mean, sure, there would be quite a bit of, I don't know, millions or whatever that would come in, but it wouldn't be enough to make a dent in again, improving their road or improving their park, improving anything around them. So I think to some degree, you'd almost have to say a crazy idea of saying everybody should form their own HOA. They should have their own governing body for whatever that line wants to be, whether your block or a couple of blocks. And maybe they could have some of that efficiency that says, hey, now your roads are going to be buttery smooth. And now whatever maintained areas that were done by the city, maybe they're going to be a little bit better,
And well, it comes back down to like affordability, right? So
Sure.
maybe all these folks that are probably affluent and have certain incomes maybe can, and I think you see that in a lot of these private gated communities, HOAs. But if you already pay a certain amount through like your taxes or property taxes, the expectation is that these things should be there, right? Services, right? Health, police,
Sure.
fire. But it's just, reality is that it's not there. And to your point, is it a matter of government efficiency, knowing exactly how to condense down and maybe share certain things that maybe we're not doing? Do we need another Elon Musk in the state of California? Do we need
I
it?
don't know.
Because it's coming down through the federal government, but what about the state and then your local? I mean, and I think it has that effect where people start they start thinking about, well, how is our government running? What does our government really do? And if you really look at some of the essential services that we provide, or the city or any city provides, services that you need in order to maintain a good city, to maintain, the infrastructure in water, sewer, police, fire. I mean, these are very key, important things. Now, could that be ran efficiently? Look, this is not for me to say, because we don't want to do it in a setting where it's we're saying, but I think every city faces this. It's not just our city; it's everywhere.
But what I'm saying is affordable housing, and where, like, why apartments are affordable is because, again, because of the shared resources. Because, like, think about it, you get to a certain growing point to where, instead of like constantly having to hire this random plumber, you actually have a full-time plumber on hand, because pretty much he's going to stay busy, right? Like, you have like the person that just, maybe even a cleaning service. Like, you can start getting these amenities, because spread out over the 100 homes that you have in this little apartment, it's only really costing you like $1 or $2, right? Like, you can maintain the service. So that's where I think the efficiency comes in, and that's where the cost savings come in. That's where you get to affordable housing.
Yeah.
Because if you were to try to do that same thing again, like on a grand scale, how much space does it take to have 100, homes? And now you're dealing with everything that goes in with those homes, instead of, again, you have probably let's say two bathrooms for every home. So now you got 200 toilets you got to maintain, and probably 200 to 300 showers you got to maintain. Like, just efficiency goes out the window. So
yeah, and it takes me back to looking at how a lot of these cities that were established back in the days, right, when the Industrial Revolution, or when we started becoming big manufacturing, not necessarily in Madera, but look at San Francisco, LA. How these cities really started. They started at a core, right, like this downtown or wherever the train was, right, because obviously you needed to ship out goods or bring in goods, or whatever these expressways or corridors that brought in these goods, whether sometimes they were by seas and bays, right? But nevertheless, their main core, and kind of to your point, I think when they were really efficient was back then, when they can control this small area.
Yeah.
But with expansion and growth, obviously comes the desire for land and land use. Now you need industrial space to manufacture this. Well, you're going to need public housing. You're going to need housing. So going back to the affordable housing, I think that when you looked at this and you go back to America and look at public housing, when that was really effective, is it was effective throughout the growth of America in the 1950s and 60s. And public housing was exactly for that. Folks said, hey, you know what? Right now, we need housing. Well, here's public housing from the federal government, right? That was the idea of it. Now it's frowned upon, because the majority of people, at least from what we're conditioned to believe, is that it's a lot of poor people. They don't work, they're drugs and what have you. But truthfully, it's just the fact that these people do work. They just can't afford or they don't have the incomes to be able to afford the amount of housing that one already has, or people making over $100,000, especially when homes are between $400,000 to $500,000. It's not easy for someone to say at $16 an hour can certainly afford that, and I see that unless it's bundled up with more family members. And that's the other concept. Kind of to your point is that maybe that's kind of where we're starting to head to, where in order to make it affordable, a family of 5 may want to consider staying there. I mean, just the idea of saying you're going to live with your brothers and sisters and their kids and whatever. I mean, it sounds a little, to me, like a little. It would be insane trying to go into your home and next thing you know, you see little rugrats everywhere, right? I mean, but essentially, it's been done before.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know if this is the way to do it. Maybe on that same plot of land.
Yeah.
Instead of paying property taxes for 3-4 different parcels outside, why not just pay on one? Why not just build on that and get yourself where all families can live together, generate wealth, save that money, and then do it slowly and acquire more? And I think you see in a lot of these, I think Abel was talking about, you see this a lot in a lot of certain groups of people that they do that, and they do it in a community type of fashion, that it really, really works. It works. You acquire one property, you come together, you buy another one, and you keep on generating those assets until finally, you know, you have your family's grown to that point.
But see that's my point with any kind of subsidized anything, whether it be food or living or whatever, is I'm not opposed to or completely opposed to like the Section 8 or the assisted like funding that people get for housing. What I'm saying is, if you were to ideally build any kind of apartment complex like you guys built downtown, but instead of just for perpetuity, just paying subsidized living, give that person the pathway to ownership. Because again, they're buying like probably a 500 square foot room. So the value of it can't be that much, right? But if you gave them a pathway and said, hey, in like 10 years, you own it.
You're starting to sound like a socialist.
Well,
you know?
no, but you own it.
Yes.
And you know, I mean, there's obviously there's got to be some kind of way so that people don't work the system to necessarily take advantage of it. But ownership to me is what, and not government ownership. It's you the person. That's where all this government funding always have that disconnect, is because I agree. Yeah, people maybe work in a minimum wage job, but they don't want necessarily, or they can't afford to live by themselves, but they want to live by themselves. Okay, but you help them out. But the end goal, that cheese at the end, is to say, look, you're going to own this someday. It's yours. You're going to have it paid for, and this way, when you have your family, or you can sell it.
Yeah,
whatever.
And there is mechanisms in there where if you're renting from one of these public housing and or Section 8, I think a certain amount of your money is allocated for self-sufficiency, and that would be where you would put money aside up until you can afford it now. But again, that becomes very difficult, because if you look at the people that transition from public housing to buying homes, it's not at the rate that you would want them to, right? You would want them to be there no more than 3-4 years and then move on to get yourself a home. But sometimes, the rent is so inexpensive because you're getting a subsidy for that voucher, that it's very convenient, and it's just enough to let me breathe, to be able to spend some money and be that consumer that we're destined to be, right? I mean, obviously, you can't. I mean, there may be people out there that are penny pinch, but you can only penny pinch so much, and you can save so much if you're making this much money. It's going to take you a longer period of time, but I mean, you still have to consume. You have to buy the car to get you to work. You have to, buy the food to get you through the week. So, and if you're allocated this much money, then it's not a lot that you can do. But to your point, I think having that path to ownership with these particular buildings, again, what we're saying is essentially government can front load here. We're going to help you get on your feet, but essentially you are going to own this.
Yeah, and I think you're going to help both sides, because I know the conversation is always, well, what's in it for the other guy?
Correct.
Okay, well, at some point when these are all owner occupied and they're bought, what happens? You got to buy another one, or you build another one. So there's your re-incentive. The guy's got his money back, probably with some. He's obviously he's got to make money. But then now he says, okay, well, we're all full. Everybody owns these places. Great, now you go build another one.
Yeah.
And that's how you continue that growth of these homes that you need, instead of just saying, well, this is our affordable housing. We're never really going to expand upon it because you're always just renting. This guy, like you said, he stays 2 years, then he's out, then the next guy comes in. That's not a long-term plan. That's
No.
just that's why you're kind of always just going to see the same places.
And I mean, and that concept is, I think some people may see it as they frown upon that concept because, again, it's coming from a government subsidy. But, people forget that
Subsidies aren't bad if the
Yeah.
government can somehow recoup the
Yeah.
money. Like a loan,
Yeah.
that's what a loan is. You're giving me money now that I'm going to get it back eventually.
And I'll bring an example. I mean, going back to when FHA was introduced, obviously prior to that, you couldn't really get a loan. Back then, these conventional loans required that you come in with 50% down, or sometimes and for lesser terms, 4 or 5 years. And if you didn't have the money, they would call you on that note and you'd lose your property just like that. There wasn't really any protection for that consumer trying to buy this home. So when FHA came into place, then that's the government stepping in. That's the government, again, taking responsibility and saying, hey, in order for us to build America or build this dream or this ideology that you're going to be your own, you're going to plant your stake, your flag in your home, then we have to give them the opportunity of a dream home. So FHA gave them that opportunity because now you had financing up to 96.5%. I mean, prior to that, you had to come in with 50%. Now you're coming in with 3.5%, of which the government is backing in case you default. Yeah, you pay a small mortgage insurance, but who do you think subsidizing the other amount? The banks love the idea because now the banks have a guarantee from the government. So now, I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
How that was the opportunity, a pathway to get to this homeowner, and look at it today. Now you have generational wealth stem from that exact subsidy that today people can say, well, I bought a house in Monterey back then for $20,000, but today it's worth $5.5 million, right? Look at the amount of wealth that was generated because, again, these subsidies help you get off you get off of this dependency. And I'm not saying people were dependent. I'm just saying they were hardworking, but the wages were not enough to keep up with these terms that they were being offered at the time. So without any government interference to help, then that would be difficult. And I think it's the same thing here for affordable housing. You just want to do it in a very efficient way. And also, like you said, a path of ownership that, hey, you know what? I have something to look forward to. That maybe how do I get it back? Now that's the question. And this is where maybe someone like you or Elon would come back and say, well, let's just develop this efficiency model where here's how we're going to get this back. Because we're going to take equity. And here's this concept of shared equity now. And this is what you're seeing with a lot of first-time buyers. Your thought on that?
Well, so, I mean, I think you get it back because like we've talked about is, the property tax increase, because we're at a set rate, that it comes at the time of sale. So if I got somebody who is renting and obviously that property is only acquiring that, 1%, 2% that we're getting at the city level, at the time, maybe 15, 20 years later when they buy it, now they have that reevaluation, it's hopefully gone up more than that 2%. The city does benefit from that. We do see more taxes. We do see that money coming back. I mean, the point of government, and that's the part that, again, going back to this idea, the point of government is to do the dirty work that the average person couldn't, right? When we say, look, I don't want to put my money up. I don't want to do that. Well, that's what government does. Nobody will sell us this plot of land. We can't get it done. That's what government does. That's its design. That is to go in there and do things that average people just can't work out together. So that's why I say, when you say where is it going to come back, it's going to come back in taxes.
No, and you're right. And here's the for example, I mean, there was this in California. We talk about affordability, right? So programs that are out there. We work a lot with CalHFA. USDA has a certain program, VA. The 100% financing, which is great because, I mean, if you're out in a rural area and you meet the income qualifications, and a USDA loan would allow you to come in with zero down. I mean, that's amazing. A VA, obviously, again, as a government, you did your time, you served your duty, and you're going to get 100% financing, and really no mortgage insurance premiums monthly. You'll have to pay a funding fee, but that's a great way of getting into a home. These folks that that find these or are eligible for these products, it's great. But then you have these first-time buyers that are out there looking for homes, and that there's that gap of like, where do I come up with this money?
Yeah.
And this is where CalHFA comes in. And if you remember, they had this Dream for All. That was the initial round that went out. It was like, hey, we're going to give you 20% down for your home. Here it is. You're going to get 20% down. You just have to meet the income qualifications. And that went like this, Rohi. I mean, within a period of a week or two, all the reservations were done. So they thought this over. So now the 2.0 version was, well, we're going to do a Dream for All, but here are some of the qualifications now. The people that we thought we were going to affect change with, obviously, is the opposite effect.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people qualified, and it wasn't the people that are most vulnerable. So this time they put some layers there of qualifications, and now it's like you have to be a first generation homeowner, right? So you couldn't have owned a home. Your parents couldn't have owned a home. So it's pretty good to help those folks that otherwise couldn't qualify. But it was a shared equity, and what that meant is, okay, I'm going to lend you 20%, okay? But here's the catch. I'm going to lend you 20%. Whenever you go on to sell your home, though, you're going to pay me back that 20% and a small amount of shared equity on that. So whatever equity you gained on that, I'm going to take 15% or 20% of it, right? So you bought the house for $400,000. 5 years later, you sell it for $600,000. You gain $200,000. So in this case, not only do you pay the original 20%, but you also give up a little bit of that shared equity. Now, that is efficient because now someone that finally got their home, again with the 20% subsidy, has a catch on it, but now you turn it over and you go buy yourself another house. Well, now you have to pay back that, and those funds come back into this program to be recycled again, and hopefully someone else can use it. But now you've gained some equity on that or some interest, so you can continue to grow this program. It's a seed, right? And I like the concept because it gives you a pathway to ownership that otherwise would be difficult to do, not having that fund to meet that gap. But I like your idea, Rohi. I hope more people would come onto the show and really start talking about how that would help, because I see that development has become very expensive, and this is why you're starting to see that a lot of these areas of land are being rezoned again to be able to meet higher density properties, so that we can get more people in there, because it's costlier to develop them singly, right? I mean, I think you would.
You know what? I would go back and say, I don't know if you ever played the game, but play the game SimCity.
I have not played the game.
It was something it was a fun game to play, because I think if the average person tried to build their own city and realized natural growth and the way things have to happen, it gives you a good insight to understanding again how, because the game's fun, because again at some point you realize, like, you know, you're minimizing your input to like the whatever fire, and all of a sudden now you're having more houses burn down, so people are leaving the area, or you know, you build in the wrong areas certain amenities, and now you have a casino that's popped up, and you don't realize, like, oh crap, it's bringing a bunch of, you know, crime into the area, you know. So it's a fun game to play, because again, it takes a lot of strategy to really make the perfect place that doesn't have some kind of problems, you know. So I don't know. I would just say go dive into it, download the game, and try play for a little bit. It's kind of fun, but you know. But I still go back to my point, the original point, which is I still believe that there's something in the system of these HOAs that, when ran effectively, is somehow much more efficient because of that micro government. Okay. And I'm going to say that because, again, if ours had been run a little differently, not to criticize it too much, but we started with $350,000 in the bank 20-some years ago, 25 years ago. If it had put into even like a 1 or 2% interest-bearing account, it would have grown to the point to where we might not even have association dues at this point and still be able to provide services to its community. So that's what I'm saying. If somehow there was a mechanism to micro-govern certain areas, I think maybe just the residential areas, there would be some of this efficiency where, again, people could have the control over their roads and the control over their infrastructure that was there. And where's the savings? Well, now if the city's not maintaining this area road, we are. That's less cost to the city. That means, you know, So there should be this natural like reduction of fees, you know.
No, of course. And
So I'm always a big fan of that. Like anytime I can, you know, get to a point to where like things can just run, and that's where you're going to see efficiency.
yeah, and without getting too much into the weeds, we do have
Yeah.
certain districts that are set aside for certain things, right? Like, and those districts obviously are governed by those areas that it serves, and there's obviously costs associated with it.
Sure.
It's kind of like an association, right? And I think in certain cases, there's people that are very hyped up about it. Yes, I'm willing to do what I
Yeah.
can to make it look good. In other areas, it doesn't. So you have a lacking. You look at the service on one area, and you look at the service on the other, and you says, why can't the city look the same? Well, obviously there you
Yeah.
go. It's those micromanaging, like you said.
Yeah.
Whereas certain folks in certain areas may say, and this is not necessarily just Madera in general.
Sure.
We're talking statewide, and because these districts are formed everywhere, right? They're in all these cities, and some may not have the resources to do it. It may just be 2-3 people, and those 2-3 people don't have the capacity or financial means to be able to bring that up to par like someone on the other side may, and you'll see the difference in their districts, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, even it gives it's the ability to, again, because of your micro governing, it gives you the ability to write rules that don't necessarily have to be law or policy from the city side, like how tall your grass can be and how you can't, you know, work on some of these association crazy rules, like you can't work on your car in the front yard.
Yeah.
You know, and in this way, as a homeowner, I don't have to worry about my neighbor next door whose the house looks like trash. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's a dump site.
And,
you
and
know?
I agree to that. I think, you know, having some regulation, Rohi, certainly helps. I think, you know, with affordable housing coming back in full
Yeah.
circle, I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of room for
Yeah.
improvement in how
Sure.
we go about it. And hopefully we bring you some more of that information. But if you're watching us for the first time, continue to like, subscribe, and follow us. You know, we need more following. But again, we're going to make a shout out to the Donut Basket here locally. We want to let you know that your coffee is great. If you're
Good.
watching, feel free to continue to hit us up and want to market with us. We'd be more than happy to help you with that. But this is it for today. Rohi, anything else you want to
No,
say?
that's
Parting
it.
words?
Efficiency,
Okay.
no.
So with that efficiency, that's right. We'll see you next week.